Hello everyone, welcome to another session of the Film Voyage. Today we have with us a pioneer in the history of Hindi cinema, Mr. Gopal Varma. You all know him as the director of films like Rangila, Satya, and Company, and all these great films that we all have grown up on, and like the films that have inspired us to become filmmakers. And literally, Satya and Company are the reason most of us want to make films. And it's a huge honor to be speaking to you right now. So thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks.
Like the first question I want to ask you about your filmography in context of your filmography, and I want to start in reverse of where you are now, and then we'll be getting to where you came from. So now when we see you coming from all those films that I just spoke about, Satya, Company, and now where are you situated in your filmmaking journey? What is it that concerns you now, and what is it that moves you now?
So I would like to believe that something which I was very excited about maybe 10 years, 20 years back might not interest me in the same way as when it had. For example, my first film, Shiva, when I see it, I find it very boring. The reason being because I'm not the same person. I was fresh out of college when I made the film. So I thought that was the world. And I didn't know anything beyond the world of college politics and Bunda's elements in college. But over the years, I've met so many others, and I've seen the world in a much more larger and more complex perspective, I would say. That doesn't mean it's better. I don't mean it that way. I'm only saying that it is different. So I think when you think about yourself 5 years back, you're not the same person almost, because, like I said, everything changes and everything is different now. Yeah. So, and I live by the time, I live by today. I really don't dwell up much upon what happened yesterday. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. So I'm pretty much excited about what I'm doing only today.
So what is it that excites you today? Because now you have a film on the D Company coming out, and that is a
Yeah.
subject that you have grappled with before. So, I mean, what am I taking from this antithesis is that you're grappling this, you're looking at the same thing from a different eye, perhaps. But what is it
Not,
that's exciting you about it again?
Well, my interest as a filmmaker is to be able to tell the story of D Company. D Company is not exactly about Dawood Ibrahim, though he's just one part of it, the founder member. But D Company is about a lot of people who lived and died under its umbrella. Yeah.
When you're making these films, like for example, like let's take like your film Climax that came out that came out last year, or the coronavirus film that you shot during lockdown. Once you get that stimuli, like the 10 ideas that you spoke about, the difference between you and the other people is that they pick one out of those 10 ideas, you make all of them, and you have that conviction to make all of them. Where are you coming from with that conviction? Where do you get that conviction to be able to say that, okay, I have this thought, and the next moment you know that, okay, the edit is done and it's about to come out?
2 points there. One is I take decisions very fast. And point two, and I like to implement them the moment I make the decision. And I've got this team of people, youngsters, who work with me, and I assign one person to do a X film and another person to do Y film. So there are a lot of people simultaneously working units. It's not like all of them I am making. I'm not. I am just initiating the idea and I'm facilitating the project. And after that, it is some others who could be handling it. Okay. But now there's a question of there could be some person who takes it very passionately, and people say that it's my baby, I put my blood and sweat on it and all that. No, I think I don't take films seriously. I don't take myself seriously. It is just something entertaining. Like, for example, we take coronavirus. We just started the moment the lockdown happened. In 1 week, I started shooting because we're all holed up in one bungalow. And the whole film was shot there, almost with zero cost. Okay. And Climax film, I actually shot in between 12 days, the whole film. You know, film might work or not, but that does not anything to do with the speed at which you're making. The two films I've spent my maximum time in my entire career, both in terms of money and time and duration, are art and department, and they are the biggest failures of my career. So that doesn't mean anything.
Also, what happens is, like, right now when we see your filmography, it seems at this point it seems to be divided into there's these sections of films that you are coming out like for the digital space, constantly reinventing there with a lot of stuff that people may or may not agree with. And there's this other segment of films where there's Veerappan, there's Sarkar 3, there are these bigger films. So what is it like? Where do you find that line that, okay, now I've made a Sarkar 3, now there's another one that I'll be making which will be probably a bigger one, or probably, this will be for the OTT. How that decision making, where does that kick in?
What excites me at that time, I mean, for example, I made this film called Naked. I just shot it with my cell phone in one or two rooms in my office. So I don't think there's much of a difference in my thinking and when I'm making a film called Naked and I'm making a film called Sarkar. Because both of them in their own way excite me. I don't see difference as long as all of them are entertaining me or provoking me or kind of interesting me in some way or the other. I don't see difference between them.
Now, going back a little bit, when you were like before Shiva, when you were starting to make that film, and Shiva, of course, it's been talked about a lot that, okay, that was the first time we noticed those shots with the steady cam, and that was some other different kind of a film. We hadn't seen college politics like that, and which kind of propelled a lot of other filmmakers to make films like that. And that was the world you knew. But in terms of the craft, in terms of the techniques of filmmaking, what was your learning like? Where did you learn the most from?
If you see my early films, you see a lot of movement of the camera. The steady cam constantly moving around or the cranes coming down and all that. But over the years, I started becoming more interested in characters, more interested in performances, more interested in intelligence and the psychological aspects of characters. So my camera kept on coming closer and closer to the actors. Yeah.
And the first time we kind of noticed that, okay, it's actually when where we kind of noticed the eyes and the minute expressions in company, where the way you've staged those scenes, where we don't exactly know who is where in context of the space, but you know exactly what the dynamics are and the way that it's been shot. It was now from that you moved on in terms of your technique. You kept reinventing, like you kept trying different things, and with department you took it to a whole another level. You took Mr. Bachchan, you took Mr. Dutt, and you shot it on a camera that was like, people wouldn't, I mean, everyone would have said that, why are you making a feature film on this camera? What propelled that decision of yours?
Two things. Now that you mentioned company, see, I always have this thing of, I think the most important thing in a film for me is placing of the actors. One example I give from companies, and Mohanlal, Ajay Devgan comes to meet Mohanlal. And Ajay Devgan is sitting in front of Mohanlal, and back somewhere, Vivek Oberoi is sitting in a sofa, and Akash Khurana is sitting in a profile. Now that audit, there's not audit. In fact, that is how it should happen. But the moment if I take a decision of all three are sitting in front of Mohanlal, though the dialogue won't change, the content won't change, I don't think the feel will be the same. Because of the odd displacement of the actors, the cutting point and the angling of the camera, the compositions, everything will change because of that. I believe in that a lot. In terms of my most important thing when I come onto the set is I think of how to place the actors in what context. Okay. Now coming back to what you said about the department thing. See, when I was the first guy to use digital in Rakta Charitra, okay. Before that, I was the first guy to use Steadicam. When people are seeing, even my senior cameraman like Gopal Varma who shot Shiva, he was very reluctant because he said you can't balance the frame, you can't be sure of the focus, and it will be a very cheap technique to use in conventional cinema. In fact, Steadicam was avoided for a long time. Now coming to department, see what I realized, these small cameras, because the weight is much lesser and the size is much lesser, you can take angles and things which have not been imagined, could be imagined before. Now, because the film didn't work, people thought it is something very irresponsible and stupidity and tackily shot film, is what they said. But my contention is, if it was shot with normal Alexa or normal cameras, even it would have been as big a failure. And if Sarkar was shot with this small camera, it would still been as big a hit. So the cameras have got nothing to do with how the film eventually shapes up. Because camera is just a recording instrument. It records whatever is put in front of it. And it's up to you how to move it or how to angle it or how to do anything.
So, but as you said, if Sarkar was shot on that camera, it would still turn out to be good. What was it that you felt that a certain film does not work? Like, is it the script, or what is it according to you that why?
See, it's always any time a film not working is majority is the script. Sometimes it can be the actors. You know, something in the casting and maybe the performance. See, I think script and editing are the two things which predominantly are responsible for the film's failure or success, for that matter. Okay, and actors definitely will make a difference, but I would put the editing and scripting as on a priority.
How much?
Even if you look at the reviews, they'll always mention the story. If you look at it,
how much emphasis do you lay on editing? Like with all these films,
editing is a complex thing because you only can edit the way you want to see the film, but well, that really will match to the person who's watching it, I'm not very sure, because every person will have a different wavelength in terms of at what speed you can assimilate a product, and at what speed, how much is too much for someone, or how less is too less is for someone. I think that's a call of take. Because I remember when I first watched Natural Born Killers, it kind of dazzled me in terms of the editing and camera movements, which probably spearheaded a new wave of cinema. Hollywood Stone did that back in 1992. And when I showed that, I was dazzled, and I was really impressed with that whole new way of looking at storytelling. But when I showed that to Nana Patekar, and just like that, Nana Patekar felt so offended with the way the film was shot, because it was the highest disrespect to cinema to use camera and everything like that. You know, so I think it's very difficult for anyone to really say that this is the right thing, because then it again becomes a question of your own individual sensibility. So at the most, a maker can take a decision of what he wants to, and just hopefully there could be enough number of people to sustain the logistics of that film.
so what is your editing process like? How do you go about editing your films? Like when it comes to normally, say a film like say D Company.
Editing for me is actually cinematic storytelling, for want of a better word, because if the script has dialogue, how you're able to put in an emotion is a result of one, the composition of the camera, the expression of the actor, and then in what kind of a layout you're unraveling the scene. I'll give you two examples. Okay.
Yeah.
When my very beginning, when I was a watcher, there is a Ravindra film which he made with Singh, you know, and in a wide shot, the scene starts, and Sridevi comes into the house wearing a short skirt, and then they start speaking whatever dialogue in the close-ups, and then she leaves. Okay. Now, when I was as an audience, when she came in a short skirt, my eyes went to her thighs. And then the dialogues were going on in the close-up. So I was getting irritated, because already the directors aroused my interest in something which was not there in the script, which I was not expecting. And my mind was more on her short skirt rather than what is happening in the scene. Okay. Now, a simple editing technique could have saved this by letting her come in a close-up, and after the scene is over, when she's going out, you cut to the wide-angle shot. Then you get to see her thighs also. So you actually, satisfy others, and also the poet called Gopal Varma. So I think that is what editing can do. It is just to draw attention at each point of time to how it will enhance it, or how you can manipulate the audience's emotional state of mind. That is what I think editing is about. Yeah.
So, talking about what kind of attracts the mind and the subjects you chose, you started with experimenting with a lot of stuff. You made a campus politics film, and then made Raat, which was a very different kind of a horror film, and then came Rangila, which was a musical, then Dord, and all these films. And you were perhaps one of the first people to actually take the subject of erotica and translate it cinematically. Now, once you delve into a subject, we see that there's a phase of your films which kind of deal with the same subject. So, what it takes for you to get into that subject and get out of it? When do you feel that okay, now I'm done with this, I'll make something else?
See, I wouldn't say that because I feel, see, first of all, there's no such thing as subject. What I mean by that is, if you take The Godfather, for example, there's one novel, but I think you can make 1,000 films out of that novel. Any character you take out and you make his story, his or her story, it becomes a different film. Because human beings, at the end of the day, they have the same problems, they have the same conflicts, the same relationship issues. Not now. I'm talking about even if you take a story which happened 500 years back or 1,000 years back, the fundamental emotional shift doesn't change at all. Okay. Then it's a question of what part of it, the characters change, the story changes. Okay. The conflict point changes, the story changes. So then automatically everyone will have, like for example, when you tell me that I stick to the same, most filmmakers do the same kind of film, and I'm the only guy who keeps on jumping into genres which have no correlation with anything at all. So after I made Shiva, I made Raat, and then I made some Rangila, and then it's and the Dor. So all of them have no connection at all. Because I like all kinds of films and all kinds of books used to interest me when I was a college student. Like I think I can make at least 2,000 films out of Godfather, just one story, for example. That doesn't mean all of them will work. I'm not saying that, but I can make. I can see that many stories in the book. Yeah.
So, like as you spoke about this, like that you keep jumping between and because you have those interests, you don't even have an interest in the success and failure of your own film because this Anurag sir said it somewhere that uh, right after Satya, like I don't think like you took any amount of time to start Con, and you guys made Con in again like very quickly. So
See, a film is an idea, eventually a series of ideas and decisions you take over a period of time to make something which comes as a finale. So on the day of the final mixing, I lose my complete interest in the film because my mind moved on to something else. What I want to do tomorrow morning, what I want to do today, tonight. So I'm living for the future and looking forward to the future. So I don't keep an emotional attachment of any kind with the film I've already done because the film is in totality for the viewer, for the outsider. For me, it can never be in totality because it grew or it changed or it metamorphed into a certain final part when it decided to stop it. Okay. So I remember all my films in bits and pieces and shots and scenes. I can't remember any of my films in totality because I never made the film keeping the totality in my mind.
so like of course you didn't keep those totality in mind, but is there a film, is there are there, because you've made so many, are there a few films that you hold close to you more than the other ones? There's no film like that.
There could be a film which you like, but I don't like it at all. For example, Company is a film I dislike. Why? Because the kind of a material I happen to have in my hands at the time when I was making Company, and when I looked back on it after I made it, I thought it did justice to what I had, what I could have done with that material. I mean, but for the people who didn't know the material, they would be okay with whatever is being presented, and they probably will compare it with what else they've been watching or whatever else. But that is not the measurement I can look at. Okay. So when I see Company, every scene is, oh shit, I should have done this. I don't know why did you do that? Why did you do that? So I become highly critical. Likewise, there could be something which you didn't like at all. Nobody liked it at all, but I look at it again in the material comparison. I said, if this is not the kind of a technique I use, it won't even be 10% of what it already is. So in terms of what I made out of nothing is one way of looking at it. And then I couldn't make anything out of so much in it. So there's two ways of looking at it. So I look at films like that. And it's extremely rare I watch a film of mine after its release.
You made a film on journalism that uh, people seem to have like overseen or something, because that film talked about something that we see now, we see happening now. Run. So how
Yeah.
did you mount Run? Where did Run come from?
See, Run came pretty much from like what's like you rightly said, what's happening now. But I think what's happening now is 100 times more than what I showed in Run. I think Run was a very tame film compared to the kind of films Arnab Goswami is making today. So I think, yeah, but I think it's again a part of an evolving, whether you call it technology or whatever you call it, and the desperateness for holding people's attention to create drama and understanding the power it can have, the politicians using it for their own benefits. I think it's part and parcel of a democratic process, and there's nothing you can do, because trying to curb the media, I think, will be more dangerous than letting it be. Yeah.
So is that Arnab Goswami film happening, sir? Are you making that?
Yes, but the only reason I'm kind of slowing it is because the real life Arnab is making a far better films. So I just want to, and I think when I'm writing a script, his script is going far beyond what I can imagine. So I'm just trying to wait for some kind of a closure to it so that I can say, okay, let me make this part. Because it's like a script in progress. It's just not stopping. Yeah.
Apart from Run and a lot of these films that you were at one point you were very fascinated, or I'm not sure if you still are, with horror, and horror of a very different kind. Like uh, there's this way of like the way horror was shot back then. I think when we talk about horror films, it's mostly in mainstream. There was Vikram Bhatt back then who was making those films, and there were you on the other extreme. Yours were much more like Bhoot was the first time we actually got scared of our own residential buildings, and or our own apartments. So what's your what's your what's your ideas, or where do your ideas come from when it comes about what's horror for you? Let's put it that way. What's horror for you?
See, horror for me is mostly it's in your mind. I mean, I think using the audience's own imagination to scare them, I think is the most effective way of looking at it. Horror is where you are you're constantly keeping the audience on the edge and not ever really showing the source of the fear, because the source of the fear will elicit a definitive reaction from you, in the sense that it will for want of a better word, you either can run, or you either can attack, or you can scream, or whatever. But as long as you're not in control of what is it that is creating fear, it keeps on rising up, it keeps on clutching your heart. That is what the technique of Booth for me was about. To illustrate it, actually, there's one scene I shot in the film. Now, Urmila gets up from the bed. It's a duplex apartment. And as she comes out, and the camera is on the ground floor in a wide angle lens, and I can see her coming down, and then she goes into the kitchen, opens the fridge and has some water, and comes back. Okay, now if the wide angle shot is not there, and I am trying to follow her into the kitchen, now following her, obviously something can jump out of the frame on her, which is what the audience will expect, because the film is called Booth and she got up in the night, and it's an obvious thing for people to expect. But the moment they have a wide shot, they can see the entire flat because the camera angle is so wide, and they know there is nothing. So when she's going into the kitchen, their eyes keep darting here and there to spot any movement where something or someone will come out, or what, or whatever. Then she finished drinking the water, she comes out. And as she goes up the stairs, now I cut to a shot of a frontal shot from the top angle of the staircase, where the audience can see behind Urmila that there is nothing. And Urmila can see in the front, and since she is not reacting, I have no reason to believe there is something in the front. So just when she comes in almost going out of focus, a cutting point, as she moves, we see that ghost standing down. And in Eros Theatre, I saw almost the whole theatre jump about 1 foot in the chairs. Now, this is what I call sheer manipulation of the audience's mind. By using the editing aspect, the wide lens is the key thing for me there. Because when you know obviously that something will jump, you're preparing for it. So to prepare them and then to unprepare them, and almost for them to make it to a point where they think that just played a trick on us, is when they get suddenly fearless, suddenly that thing comes. So that is what is called manipulation. I mean, this whole thing, if you see, you never saw anything scary. You never saw anything really horrific. It is just the audience's mind using on themselves is what I try to employ there. Yeah.
Is that thought that, okay, I have to manipulate it this way, I'll have to use a wide angle and I'll be cutting to a frontal then. Is it all instinct based, or do you actually sit down with the scene and
Sometimes it can happen that when I'm writing itself, when I'm conceiving it, it happens. And sometimes it can happen on location. Actually, when I see the thing happening in front of me, I get an idea of how to do the shot division. And most of the time, my edit is very clear in my head, exactly how I want to do it.
and you kind of took that thought of not actually showing, or not actually personifying that fear in your film, that another film that people don't talk about as much, Agyat. Where did Agyat come
Yeah.
from? What was the thought behind Agyat? That it shoot like, because
See, Aryan is, I think it is pretty much same thing that if you take a set of characters and you leave them in a place which they're not in control of, yeah, I think it's a pretty much very often done film in Hollywood, like the series of Friday the 13th, and that's also like one of my favorite genres. And the fact that you don't see it, you just hear the sounds, you just hear some kind of a movement, and you actually don't see it. So that is also becomes very internalized.
So coming from that, now I'll be talking about like this sets of films that kind of I felt are somewhere connected. There's a fan theory or something. Um, Must is a film that you made after, I think, Con and before Company. In that, I felt that it's this story if Millie became a superstar and she had a fan. Millie from Rangila became a superstar and she had a fan. So, Must as a film was about that dreamy innocence and everything. And uh, what was your like as a filmmaker? What excited you about stories like, say, a Must, or there's a film that you made in 2007 called Go, which I felt was very close to Dor.
Must were actually based upon myself because when I was a huge fan of Sridevi, and I used to collect her pictures and put in the hostel walls and everything. And then when I was trying to get a break for Shiva, I used to live in this place in Chennai. And Sridevi's house was just a couple of blocks away. So I used to go and stand outside her house and just watching the house, and just to hoping for a glimpse to see her. And so obviously after that tremendous admiration, when I finally got to meet her, I was shocked to see that how much in control of her mother she is, and how much she's she's like a child, because she's not really ever educated. She's been acting since the age of 3. So it came as a shock to me, see the actual Sridevi, from what the characters I saw, and the larger than life persona, and the sexableness and the beauty and everything. And the real person, it was almost like a kid, you know. I almost wanted to rescue her from all that and take her. I think it is that emotion I was trying to capture in Must.
Apart from horror, every now and then, comedy, and a certain kind of comedy seems to excite you. And you said somewhere in an interview that Doctor Strangelove is one of your favorite comedy films, and that kind of morbid humor. You made Power Star, and you wrote Thiruda Thiruda with Manisa, and you made a lot of like you produce a lot of course, comedy films. That was like Darwaza Band Rakho, and there was a film called Love Ke Liye Kuch Bhi Karega. So when it comes to humor in your films, how do you approach humor? What is humor for you?
everything has a humor in it. No, because I know that through my research on the underworld, or even my research on the 26/11 attacks, there is so many funny things which happen in the course of something so serious. So I feel humor set in a realistic situation and something which people can connect to. For example, like in in Rangila, when this Anup puts his feet on the seat, and the guy says, "Fire maker, fire dekh raha hai, picture dekh raha hai," you know. So I think that is something everyone would have felt it sometime or the other. And the amount of laughter which that simple line elicited in the theater is example what I'm saying, because everyone in the theater would have gone through a similar experience at some point of time in their life, you know. So I think humor connected to everyday situations and everyday thinking, I think works best, at least for me. I can't stand slapstick humor, for example. I don't like spoofs much.
Talking about your fascination with like your idea of music. Now, when we hear music from your films, it's got a very distinct sound to it. Whether it was, say, a film like The Attack of 26/11, or any of those films that there is a specific song that we hear and we say like it must be from a Ram Gopal Varma film, because the grandness of violence or the grandness of any emotion is what you kind of personify or melodify, for the lack of a better word, in your music. What's your approach to music? What do you brief exactly when it comes to music?
See, one is I was very heavily inspired and influenced by the music of John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith and Alan Shifrin in my early days. You know, they're very symphonic. It is like very larger than life, and it creates a scale and a span and grandness. You know, that's the music which influenced me a lot, because I used to very heavily listen to background scores in my early years, much before I became a director. In fact, I remember when I watched Alien, I saw that film some 17 times. And 2, 3 times actually, I used to listen with my eyes closed, because I only want to concentrate on the music which was playing in the background. You know, so I was very obsessed with background music scores, and that's what you will find even in the intensity of some of my songs. And more than anything else, I would call it intensity. But I think Rakta is one of my most favorite scores incidentally. You know,
Exactly.
it has this like adrenaline rushing, thumping intensity, which the music almost creates the violence more than the imagery on the film. Yeah.
Definitely, and in Rakta Charitra specifically, like from the entry shot, it's a slow motion shot of him entering on a scooter and just parking that scooter and like dum da da dum da dum, and it creates something else. And with Sarkar as well, a lot of films where there are characters and the way you have placed them, and someone else's dialogue is going on, but we're seeing someone else's expression, and the music is surging. So you believe a lot in the use of background score, like in contrary to the people who feel that okay, the silences and a scene's inherent drama will kind of propel it, but you feel that okay, if there is a drama, let's kind of accentuate with the larger than life background score. Is that what you think?
Yeah, see, for example, let us take the Sarkar music for that matter. Now, there's a score of Jerry Goldsmith from the film Omen. You know, he uses Gregorian chantings. The context of the film is about the devil, reincarnated, the Omen, and the music which he uses Gregorian. See, now that is what I took, and I made it into a score by, instead of using the Gregorian chants, I used the Govinda word. Okay, Govinda, 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 Govinda. This is actually a first time tried in a film called Govinda Govinda, made with Nagarjuna and Singh. And the context of that film is something about the music didn't work, because this kind of a music had to have a stay, has to have an extended period of time for it to be heard, to register, which was not the how it was made, Govinda Govinda. So it kind of fell flat there. So I thought I was waiting for to use it once again, and I thought in Sarkar I got the chance again to bring it back in this. And when Mr. Bachchan first heard, he was quite flabbergasted. He said, "No, what is Govinda going to got to do with our film?" You know. And I actually didn't have a reason, so I made up a reason on the spot, saying that Sarkar, it's more like, is a part Krishna in somewhere because he's a manipulator, Sarkar. And I think there's a difference between a straight god like Ram and a god who can do all kinds of things and mix, which is what I think Sri Krishna is. So Govinda is a thing of Krishna. Some bullshit I gave, and whether he believed it or not, it was too late to do anything about it. And that became a cult sound after Sarkar.
And like the way you just mentioned that, okay, you just came up with an answer like that. Uh, like we keep thinking about like your conviction as a
But if
filmmaker.
you say, though I never thought about it like that,
But it's
after I
not.
gave the answer, now it sounds true actually. To me
Yeah,
also it
it makes
sounds true.
sense. It makes sense. Of course it does.
But I don't believe people consciously think. They just like the sound. That's it. I don't think anybody would have thought of it after this. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course because of the performances that Govinda and the moments it comes, and we watch the film for those moments. कि यार अभी गोविंदा गोविंदा आएगा, let's just वो बहुत मस्त लगता है. But when you're making a film and where you don't have the answers, and of course the director, so they say, is supposed to have all the answers. So how do you where do you get your conviction from? Where do you drive a conviction from that even if an arc doesn't work, Mr. Bachchan will still work with you, or people will still work with you? And what's that conviction coming from? How do you create that?
See, first of all, I never think of it as having conviction. A lot of people ask this question about why does Mr. Bachchan work with you? It's because Ark is a film which failed badly, but for Mr. Bachchan, he would have seen me work as hard on that film compared to Sarkar, maybe about more harder than that. Okay. So anybody who having an impression on somebody is to do with what they think of that person's working process, or whether he was serious, or whether he was this and that. And Mr. Bachchan never saw that sincerity lesser in me, no matter which film I did with him, which is the only reason he does it. Okay, anyway, that I think is difficult for people to understand. I'm okay with that. Probably if I was in their place, I would think the same. And so, in the context of calling conviction, I don't think there's anything as such as conviction. I'll give an example. When I was doing Satya, there was a scene where I was very, very skeptical about that working, which is when Satya takes Urmila to see a film. It's an informant season, and it reports to the police. And the police come and they basically say, some guy, you have to come and surrender, and then he shoots and escapes. So the flaw in that scene for me is, why would the police, that man is supposed to kill the police commissioner of the city, is so dangerous technically. Why would the police expose themselves on the stage? And when he's in the middle of a huge number of crowd, to say that you know that you are there, because you have no idea what he's going to do after that. He can take anybody hostage, actually, in that kind of a situation. But my intention was, how will he escape without Urmila knowing that he's a gangster? Is what I wanted the audience to think at that time. Hopefully. So that is as a filmmaker, because I also couldn't think of a better way of doing it at that point of time. Okay. Now, when I narrated the sequence to some of my assistants, nobody had a problem, and they didn't ask me the question which was in my mind, that why would the police do something as stupid as that? So I thought I might get away, because a lot of times people get away with it, even myself in other films, which is what Alfred Hitchcock said, when drama begins, logic ends. Okay. So I thought I can get away. Then once I finished the film and I sent the full cut to Sandeep Chowta in Chennai to do background music, late in the night he called me and said, Ram, the film is fantastic till the point of the theater sequence. And it is such a dumb thing. How can you do something as stupid? Why will the police be so stupid to do that? And he and his entire team felt that. That's what he told me. So I thought, fucked. And I'm just... I thought I can get away, maybe I didn't, but we didn't have the time to do anything about it. And so I decided to take a chance. Now that you can't call it conviction. It is actually for lack of knowing what to do.
Why am I asking this conviction thing is that Mr. Sriram Raghavan in an interview said that during the making of Ek Hasina Thi, in the climax where she feeds him to rats, there was this like where he was skeptical about where is she going to find a cave or something. He said, and he just said, shoot it convincingly, and it'll pull it off. Something like that he said. So
Yeah. Things are happening at a rapid pace, so you don't have the time to think and think about it and then to take a decision, because in a book you can stop reading and think about it. The film is not giving you the time. It is moving at a pace which you're not. And then the audience, I do not really watch the film in the same way as how the maker makes it. See, for the audience, a film is coming in shots. It's not coming in scenes. It's not coming in story. For example, Satya, in my mind, is a story of a guy who came to make a living to Bombay. Suppose that's what I think. Okay, I'll give one example. Maniratna made film Gitanjali. And Gitanjali is about this guy, a happy-go-lucky guy, and it involves an accident. And by accidentally, the doctors realize that he has cancer, and he's going to die very quickly. Okay. Now he convinces his parents, I don't want to see your sad faces, and I want to go and live by myself. And he goes out to Uti. And then in Uti, he falls in love with the girl. And later realizes she also has cancer. Now this is a story. When people saw the film before the release, a lot of people didn't like the film, and one particular distributor said this is such a morose film. In the third scene, this guy has an accident, and there's a cancer, then there is what, and nothing happens, and he's just roaming around, and there's no drama. And what it did was, because he's buying the film, he cut those three scenes. The accident scene, the doctor telling there's cancer, and the hero telling the parents, I want to go. Okay, these three scenes he cut off in the release version in his area called Guntur in Andhra Pradesh. And Maniratnam felt that the film was about the sympathy the audience have with this character, and you've cut these three scenes. What was he doing in Uti suddenly from Hyderabad? You know, how stupid is that can be, is what Maniratnam felt. Then the film released. And all the other areas, it was money's cut. Only in Guntur, it was a distributor's cut. And the film picked up and became a massive hit, and became a massive hit in Guntur also. So without those three things. So now when I tried to understand that, and I asked the Guntur guy, okay, then meanwhile Maniratnam asked the Guntur guy, since the picture is working, why don't you put those three scenes back? And the distributor said, sir, why spoil a film which is running? No one is complaining about it. And I don't want to disturb what is running. Okay. Then when I inquired in Guntur, I asked one of my cousins who lives there, what did you think why Nagarjuna suddenly is in Ooty? He thought, no, we thought maybe it just came to Ooty. Okay. And now what happened is, there in Guntur it became a twist when he tells the heroine that I have cancer, which in other areas already know he has cancer because the three scenes were there.
Yeah.
Now, how the hell can anyone say why the film became a hit? So that is what I mean. What the audience see and what you make and why they like it can never have a connection, which is the reason 95% of the films fail because of it.
One of my favorite moments, because of course we can't move on without talking about Satya. And my favorite scene from Satya is the Guru Narayan murder scene. That happens, like that's a shootout that's happening in the middle of the streets and on the bridge, and I think a lot of it was because of the background score, that even after he's dead, you do take a moment where Bhiku is like screaming at him, and it goes on to the next scene, and the background score continues, like and it's almost not very violent. It's almost terrifying. It's almost foreshadowing that this is what will happen to these guys as well. What was that shooting that scene like? Where did that idea of that scene come? That in broad
See,
daylight.
I mean, I would credit two people mainly for that scene. One is Manoj Vajpayee and one is Anurag Kashyap. Now, I like Anurag Kashyap wrote the lines in a way which was never really in my mind at that time. That the backstory of the relationship between Guru Narayan and Bhiku Matre was never really established. Was never really highlighted or anything like that, except for when he talks once in the room and in the killing scene. Okay. But the way Manoj did, which when I actually discovered it when he was actually performing, there was a grit in him. There was something in the relationship which they had. And he was trying to justify why he had to kill him in spite of their relationship before. And him improvising that in the performance, and the way he said it, I just did not want to cut it. Though the shoes are the same thing, if I tell Manoj, the moment you shoot him, you just turn and run. As an actor, he would have done what I asked him to do. Okay. Now, but Anurag writing those lines of a backstory of a relationship between these two at some point of time, and Manoj adding that element of guilt, it's almost like you owed an explanation to the man who is killing, who he killed at the point of time. I think that is what, because he's not leaving, he's talking still to the dead body, and Satya trying to take him away from there. I think just in the background, the train coming and all that, I think, yeah, that definitely is one of my favorite moments too. And incidentally, Mr. Goyal Irani saw Satya, and he hated the background score. He told me that Ramu, just it's such a nice dramatic film, and you screw it up with the background music. It's so loud and unnecessarily dramatic. This obviously told me this before the release of the film. And then when the film became a big hit, again going in and said, I think one of the main reasons the film is hit because of the background score. Why? Because he said, I remember what I told you, but without this kind of a dramatic score, the film would have looked like one of these art films. The score made it very universal and commercial, where even the masses could understand. See, background score, I think, definitely is about highlighting or underlining and telling the audience what to feel at any given point of time. It's spoon feeding. Actually, it is spoon feeding.
You believe in that spoon feeding?
See, now what? Yeah, I believe. I love background score, but a lot of people hate my music also. In the sense, they feel I overuse it. That again is a context. For example, like Hemant Chaturvedi, the DOP of Company, he said when he saw Sarkar, he couldn't handle it beyond 20 minutes, and he walked out of the theater because the background score irritated him.
Now that each year you have like 4 films and you're constantly working, constantly making films, do you get time to watch the films of, like, your contemporaries?
See, these is a mostly watch documentaries. And my film viewing habit has gone down drastically. Whenever I get time, I usually watch foreign films.
Which are some of the films that you like?
Of course, website. I mean, I can't think of anything off just out the line. But I watch series. I mean, whether it's a Narcos or a Looming Tower,
Yeah.
and quite a few. But I would say predominantly I'm getting interested in documentaries, because I think they've become so dramatically effective, today's documentaries. So whenever I have time, my first choice is a documentary, and second is a foreign film, and third is a series. Fourth is feature films.
So any documentary that you saw recently that you felt was very, that you found very good?
I mean, I saw a documentary that it talks about what if suddenly all the people in the world disappear suddenly, just in one instant. It's a fantasy idea, but I thought it was incredible because of someone to actually have an imagination to think, and it looks so realistic. It looks absolutely, and it talks about what happens 5 hours after, 1 day after, 24 hours later, and how long does it take for what will happen to the world, and it's incredible. In 5 years, he proved that it almost becomes nature again, and there's no such thing as any civilization. Yeah.
Harish Parthu has a question. He is asking that you have in a recent interview mentioned that all your hit films were cheap copies of the Hollywood classics. While I admire your honesty, I would like to know how much the Dogma 95 and Mumblecore films movements have influenced your radical style of micro-budget filmmaking post Dongala Mutta, and what impact did Requiem for a Dream have for you?
See, honestly speaking, I never saw any of those films, what you're talking about. But I think this came, I was influenced by this not mostly because of this film called Buried. It was shot in, I don't remember the year. The fact that you could make something like that, also in early times, even Cohen for that matter. There are quite a few films in the 70s and 80s which have made thrillers, which was set in like small, very controlled locations and using very little cinematic apparatus and just to make psychological thrillers, quite a few of them. I think they influenced me more. And what you were talking about, I haven't seen.
Prashant Nadella has this question. Many directors from Hollywood say that they got inspired from Satya and the gangster backdrop built by you. How do you take this? Like Danny Boyle has said that Satya and company.
Honestly, I'm not so sure about that because I think when they are making something in the context here, in terms of, because he's making Slumdog Millionaire, you probably would have seen a couple of films, 3 4 films. And I think they say it just for effect, for the publicity of their film. I doubt they would really be meaning it.
Hi, sir. How are you doing?
Hi.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you have built your stories and made many movies with new actors. So what is the thing which you observe in the new actors? Like actually, even I'm an actor, so I wanted to know.
See, predominantly in casting, what I do is when I'm writing, for example, for a new film, D Company, I wanted an actor who doesn't look tough, who just almost has no impact when he's in the room, he's in the corner, he's not, doesn't attract or rise your attention. And slowly in the course of the film, he should be growing, almost like the audience should take about half the film to even notice him in somewhere. So that was the original description I had in my mind of how I think this character should be. And then I will keep on looking for the actors who are nearest to this description. So I eventually have to have a measurement factor. And the measurement factor comes from my own imagination of how the character should look like. Yeah.
Taking from that as well, I have a question. That the way you act, like the way you approach performances coming from like
incidentally, I want you to send me his contact. I have a role for him, I think.
Prashant.
Yeah.
Best day of your life, is it?
Okay.
Yeah. Super excited.
Okay,
Yeah, I can speak in Telugu as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, that's actually great. Send us your contact. We'll forward it to him.
Yeah. Sure. Thanks.
So first of all, a very big fan. Loved all your films, sir. So my question is related to acting because I'm also an actor from Whistling Woods as well. So my question is, when you're working with actors who wish to get into the character, how do you get them into the character? What is the process like to finally dive into it and become that? And second one is a personal question. If I wish to also be a part of your film, sir, how do I go about it?
See, I basically, when I kind of select some dialogue part and I would give the actor to say it in a certain way in theory. And depending on how he interprets it and in his voice modulation and his tone, that will be one part of the process. And second is I definitely look for a screen presence. Screen presence is something I define as when you see the person, you will not forget easily. There should be something about him which makes him stick in your mind. That's what I think is screen presence.
What's the process that you follow on set? What are the factors that you consider while blocking and staging?
As I see, the going by the location, more than anything else, it's the placing of the actors. Who stands, who sits where, and who's in which position. I think that makes, because in real life, people have a very, very individualistic, very characteristic, each of them in the way they position, they place themselves. That I lay a lot of emphasis upon. So either I'll ask the actor sometimes, how do you see yourself, and where did you be in this particular scene? or sometimes I might think about it myself, what he or she should be doing. I think that will create instantly a kind of a difference in the blocking of the camera angles, to the compositions, to the movement of the actors. Everything comes from there. And I tend to also give a movement constantly to one or two people, so that that in turn will also force the camera to keep on changing its compositions and blocks. You will instantly see a lot of that in Begum.
Varma sir, you have done movies on almost all genres, and he plans to work on animated movies.
No,
Shashank,
not really. No, because I'd like to see actors. I love to see actors perform in front of the camera, and I want to see something real. So neither animation nor CG interests me at all because of that.
yeah, someone, Yuvraj has a comment that Satya 2 really had an impact on me when I saw it in theaters. I admit I was the only one in the whole hall, but it really satisfied my angst and anger towards society world at the time. So thank you for that. Someone thanks you for Satya 2.
Okay, thank you.
So with this, we come to the end of today's session. It was great talking to you, sir. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.